This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, and welcome to another edition of Sim Tunnel, the day where we can just take a topic and have an open discussion, no handcuffs, no restrictions, no need to even be politically correct. We can talk about these topics in great detail in a completely open forum. I want your opinions on the topics. I have my own opinions on the topics, and from time to time I'll bring in guests to talk about these topics. But today it's me and you, the pit crew, and we are here to discuss aliens versus sim racers. And in the world of sim racing, we refer to the best as aliens. These guys seem to drive at a speed or pace that to us normals seems unearthly or even godlike. At times, this leads to total disrespect, and we put them on platforms as our heroes. I don't mean disrespect, I mean total respect, and we put them on platforms as our heroes. But at other times, we search for justifications for why we suck, and then we make excuses. Oh, it's their setup, oh, it's their equipment, or even worse, they must be cheating. Years ago is one thing, but as sim racing gets closer and closer to becoming a legitimate esport, or even a legitimate form of motor racing, there can be big money and careers on the line. But what is it that makes them different? What do they do that makes them so much better than us? These are the questions that I want to talk about today and answer here on the show and get into detail and maybe even incorporate those values or attributes into our own driving abilities. So I want to thank you all for being here so far. That is my little intro into it. And again, I do have my own take on things that they do differently. And things that make them different. And I'm here to tell you that in 9 out of 10 cases, it is not their equipment. In 9 out of 10 cases, it is not even their setup. And in 9 out of 10 cases, it is not them cheating. In fact, I'd even go to say it's 99 out of 100% that it's not cheating. There's a lot of cheat detection going on, and when you talk about the highest level, they're usually subjected to going face-to-face, which it's pretty hard to cheat when it's in a controlled environment. But these are the justifications that we make. These are the things that occur to us when we're looking at that leaderboard and seeing ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5 seconds back of some of what the fast guys are driving. So this is something that over 20 years of sim racing, it's always occurred to me. It's always occurred to people. I see the topic in forums all the time. And again, I have a few basics that I think make this point, and I'm going to bring a few of those up. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think these guys do, what makes them different. Some of it is just God-given talent, but some of it is, I mean, I've done interviews with Atzi Kirchhoff, Rudy Van Buren, Martin Kroenke, Michael Conti, Glenn McGee. I've talked to the best of these aliens, and they are all human beings just like us. They do the same thing every day that we do, but somehow on the track, they do skills and they do things that we just, again, can't even understand what and how they're doing it. So again, hello, a lot of people joining into the chat now, so I am kind of taking my time getting into this topic. And hello to Max, he's sitting right over there getting ready to bark when he has an opinion on something that we're talking about here today. So let's just talk about some basics. And anybody can drive a car. There's no rocket science about it. You've seen my video on what am I doing wrong, where I show you how I'm not always using all the track, how I'm cheating, as I call it, turning in for apex too early. You break down a corner on a road course, and you can easily, in your mind, imagine losing a tenth, even 2 seconds, 2/10 of a second under braking. And then you get to turn in that mid-corner speed, and you could easily lose another 1 to 2/10 of a second there. And then the exit, without even thinking, without no brainer, just comparing driving line, you can see another 1 to 2 points, 1 to 2 seconds difference there as well, and then that translates into all the speed down the following straightaway. So when you really break it down, right there, we could be 6/10 slower at exit of the corner, and maybe even another 2/10 down the straightaway. That's 0.8, and that's just one corner. Multiply that out by 12 corners, and you can see how you could be 1, 2, 3, even 5, 6, 7 seconds off of the pace of the aliens. When I did the McLaren World's Fastest Gamer, I was 3 to 4 seconds off of the aliens, and I put in a good try. I did a lot of laps. I mean, I didn't make it my life's goal to win that competition, but I consider myself a very fast sim racer. I consider myself a very good sim racer, and seeing myself that far down the leaderboard just shows you the difference between being just very good and being the Schumacher or Senna's of our sport. I'm going to come back to Schumacher in a moment. Anyway, let's talk about some basics. Car balance. Understanding the way a car turns. Let's take it to something really basic, like skiing. And when you know how to ski, you don't do the pizza shape anymore, as they said it on South Park. You don't do pizza, french fry, but you are parallel skiing, and it's just slight changes and changes of body weight and putting your body where they belong on the skis and getting the edge of the skis where they belong to make them turn. And you see people who don't know how to ski, and they will literally just lean over and fall over. I mean, just completely the opposite of the whole concept of what's doing. And that's just looking at it very simply on those terms. Well, a car has so many ways of handling. There are so many factors beyond just horsepower and even just beyond grip. But when you talk about weight transfer and what that does to the load of the tires of the car and what that does to the way the car is going to handle at that moment in time, and understanding it to that level where you're not just falling over because you put it on edges, but to the point where you are just giving it just enough to make it do what it needs to do. And understanding that balance means that you can use the car and all of its attributes to its highest level. And I think a lot of us never drive to the level to feel that just how far can I lift the throttle to pitch the car versus needing to scrub the brake to achieve the same angle of attack change. But look at the difference just in concept of speed. The guy who lifted changed all the weight distribution. And if he did it right, he loaded up those front tires and got the car to change angle, but he didn't really lose that much speed versus me or most of us who are going to scrub the brake, slow the car down, but meanwhile, we're going to have a completely different body weight at that moment in time. And you just imagine that mid-corner and understanding to the fullest the balance of the car and what you can do with it at its fullest level is something that a lot of us might not understand or know. So that's my first thought when it comes to one of the differences between aliens and sim racers. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I mean, obviously driving line is very important, and Michael Clark saying corners is where you gain speed because it's easy to go into the straight, and that's a very good point. And again, when I looked at the difference between our lap times and theirs, I broke it down to corner entry, well, braking, corner entry, mid-corner, corner exit, and then finally straightaway speed. And again, just a slight difference in all those spots multiplied by the amount of corners on the track, and you can see a huge difference. Ricardo asked a question, and I'm really glad you asked that question, Ricardo. Do setups have a huge impact to becoming an alien? Let's talk about setup. I can give you a great example from personal experience just in the last week. In the Sim Racing Systems race, Cy Yip was kind enough to loan his setup to the entire world, shared it on our forum for everybody, and I was still 3 seconds off of his pace. Now that can come down to preparation. His setup was absolutely faster than mine and more competent than mine, but what he was doing with that car and with that setup was still a far bigger difference than the setup. The setup times my driving talent is less than his ability on its own, is what I'm getting at. But I think when you get into how does one alien beat another alien, setup is going to be a big part of it. Getting back to my understanding, them talking about balance and understanding of the car, they can work on their setup based on that kind of knowledge and wisdom of balance. We make adjustments based on the way we're driving the car, but perhaps we're driving it incorrectly and then making setup changes to really cure our bad driving style. And I'm speaking mainly about me when I say our in this case. Hello, Sebastian. And Spatial's very good at long straightaways. And that is a skill set in its own, absolutely. And a stable setup and having a good rig and that I think is important. I think overall confidence in your equipment is a basic element. But again, I talked to Mitchie Hoyer not long ago, who was in that World's Fastest Gamer competition, and he's doing it on a beat-up G25 with a desk chair that's on wheels. That's the kind of setup that I would have used 15 years ago and would have been embarrassed then to use, let alone now. No offense, Mitchie, but I do mean that it is important to be confident in your setup, but I don't think that's the difference. I mean, I know many guys winning world championship level races on much less equipment than a lot of us have. And yes, they gripe about their equipment. They like better equipment, but they don't need it to win. Hello, France. All right, let me go on to my next point, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. You know, what do you think they do differently? What do you think is different about their personality? All right, let's talk about preparation and teamwork. I've learned that a lot of these drivers don't spend insane amount of times driving, but I think that they maximize their time on track. So where I might drive for 2 hours in preparation, I might waste an hour and 40 minutes of that being sloppy. You guys have seen my streams. You've seen me drive. I'm proud of my driving ability, and at the same time, I can't watch a lap of my driving without seeing mistake after mistake after mistake. And if you're preparing, you need to be running at that maximum level, optimizing your time. You know, professional soccer players, football players, they go to practice and they maximize their time. They are working their skill sets. They are doing what it takes to get the most out of themselves and their equipment at all times. And I think that alien drivers do the same thing. They're not wasting their time just playing, having fun, doing lap after lap for no reason. They are either working on driving line or they're working on setup, and then they're done. I think teamwork is a big part of it. I don't think there are very many aliens today that are going it alone. I think it does take teamwork and on several different levels. Number one, to push each other. Number two, to work on setup. Three, work on comparing different driving lines. Everybody has a different style. Maybe even though this guy's the fastest guy on the team, this guy is fastest through Sector 2. What's he doing? So I think preparation and teamwork is a big part of it. Let me get a little drink here. So again, I know we've had a few more people join the chat since we started. Basically, today's topic is aliens versus sim racers. What makes them different? What makes them better? What do they do better? What do they know better? And as today's sim racing world changes and we're getting closer to esports as being a profession, we're getting closer to sim racing being considered a legitimate motorsport and maybe leading to pro careers in various different forms, I think it's going to become even more critical. What is this difference between the common sim racer and the aliens? So, another thing that, let's just say, I talked about the driving line and tenths here, tenths there, hitting their marks. So if I go do an hour-long practice session, I'm not sure that I'm that great about hitting that exact braking spot every time and using the exact amount of braking pressure every time to be able to really start minimizing that braking zone. You think of any of the Formula One greats, and they leave no meat on the bone when it comes to a braking zone and turn in for the corner. And I think that even in practice, hitting my marks, I'm not great about putting the car in the identical spot so that I can surely test everything and then make adjustments. And if I'm off by a car length or two, I've changed every other timing mark of the corner from that moment on, and it makes it very hard to really push it to the next level. consistency, hitting the marks, consistency. These are hugely important factors. Sorry about that. I just got a text and I thought it was actually regarding the show, so I wanted to stay with it. I'm going to give you guys a little food for thought, and I'm going to take a moment to watch this with you. And this is a video that really described what made Schumacher in his best day better than everybody else. And I don't want to get into the argument that he was with Ferrari. No, what made Schumacher is the fact that he took lower level equipment and proved his name in that and then got the ride. And you can make the same argument for Ayrton Senna, that he took cars that had nowhere belonging in the top 10 or on a podium and did so. And that is what truly made those guys the drivers, in my opinion, that they are. But let's just take a moment. Tell me if I'm blowing out your ears on this video, but give me a moment. Let's watch this.
It's almost as if he can't understand why everyone else can't do it. It's a bit like Jim Clark, who apparently couldn't understand why no one else could go as quickly. But you know, he is very good.
Give it time. It's worth watching. And it just makes my point a little bit today.
I've watched him testing at Silverstone, and particularly going through Beckett's, a very fast right, left, right sequence of corners. And the speed that he carries into the corner, I mean, I stood there thinking, I don't believe what I've seen. He is so fast into the corner.
Well, it's nothing sort of extra special. It's just a way that he controls the car almost with a throttle, instead of where I think the majority of drivers that I've known, someone like Damon, I know David, Gerhard as well, Mika Hakkinen, exactly the same. When they brake, you brake, you change down the gears, and then you might go on and off the throttle. And I think Ayrton was the biggest example of that. When he used to be in the middle of a corner, his throttle movement was so quick, and he was always on the throttle. Where Michael has this braking, changing down, then he's constantly on the throttle straight away.
Even if every driver was driving a white car with a white helmet, we could still just about see the technique of Michael Schumacher. It wouldn't be easy though, and to get a much better idea, we need to look at data recordings taken from the controls, from the steering, particularly the throttle, and also of course the brakes. And we've had a rare opportunity to obtain data from the British Grand Prix qualifying from both Michael Schumacher and Johnny Herbert's car. This blue trace is the throttle. When it's right at the top, it's full throttle. And so now we can see the accelerator building up, a section of flat out running, before then lifting off and then braking down for the next corner. It's important with a Formula One car to be progressive with the throttle, and so we don't see it just going vertically up, we see it progressively increasing. And that's particularly important through this corner, Bridge Corner, because that is taken at 160 miles an hour, and technique is all important to save time. Michael Schumacher approaches on full throttle with the blue line at about 160 miles an hour. Eases back, and then he progressively increases to be on full throttle on the exit, before then lifting abruptly, of course, to brake for Priory. Now comparing this with Johnny Herbert's throttle position, we can see that in fact Herbert keeps on full throttle for longer. Certainly no lacking in bravery, but then he has a much bigger lift to slow the car down more, before slightly raggedly increasing it back to full throttle again. Now looking at the speed trace, the blue line of Michael Schumacher shows his speed increasing all the way up to 160 miles an hour, and then in fact it really rather levels off all the way through the corner, hovering around the 160 miles an hour point before dropping abruptly away again as he brakes for Priory. Now looking at Herbert's speed trace, he's a little slower out of the previous corner, but gradually makes up ground, and so he's virtually as fast on the very approach to Bridge. But because of that much bigger lift on the throttle, his speed then drops down quite significantly. He's 5 miles an hour slower in the middle of the corner. Now looking at the steering trace, we can see just how close to the limit the drivers are. On the approach to the corner, the trace is fairly smooth, but then in the middle of the corner we can see from the zigzag lines just how much correction Schumacher is having to make for tiny slides that can't actually be seen, not obviously anyway, from the outside of the car. Now, looking at Johnny Herbert's steering input, on the straight it's much the same, but in the middle of the corner he's not so near the edge, and so the trace is smoother. As a result, on this corner alone, Schumacher was 0.2 of a second faster than Herbert, and in fact in qualifying, over the whole lap, beat him by 1.5 seconds, or 100 metres at the end of the lap.
I think the main ability I have is...
Okay, I could play the entire thing, but right there I think we see this is amongst aliens, essentially, and we're talking about 1.5 seconds difference. But, David, I saw you caught that. His application of throttle looked like traction control, or it looked like ABS. It looked like somebody else. It wasn't a human way of applying the throttle. And like they said in the video, micro adjustments that nobody else would even see, that the car was still slipping, but he was so on the edge and just ever so slightly wiggling that car. You looked at that steering input, and obviously it was in perfect timing with that traction control, automated traction control and automated steering control simultaneously that he's able to do compared to Johnny Herbert. I mean, it's not like we're talking about compared to me. And it ended up being 1 to 2 tenths faster on one corner, and then again leading onto the straightaway, and so on and so on. The skill set is not a matter of equipment. It's not a matter of your sim rig. It's not a matter of setup. It's a matter of doing whatever it takes to get the most of the car. And it's not as easy as saying that. I'm not trying to minimize their skill set, but, you know, I played soccer for so long. I even played in college. The difference between a guy who just played in college and the guys you see in the pro leagues or like on Premier League in football, European football, you can't even make a comparison between them. I did cycling. I raced plenty. I raced in all the way up to B class in cyclocross. The difference between me and a pro level is painful in the case of cycling. It's driving as a sport, and I know people have joked about NASCAR in particular. Oh, you just turn left, a fat guy can do it. It's like, yeah, well, it might not be an endurance sport like cycling. It certainly is an endurance sport. Anybody who knows racing knows well enough to know that. But the skill set that it requires and the consistency and the accuracy that it requires to do this can be compared and parallel any and every precision sport on Earth. No doubt in my mind. So I think that the bottom line is, when we compare aliens versus sim racing, there is no getting over talent. That is the number one. That is the only difference. Everything else we talk about really truly is just us justifying, looking for excuses, looking for anything that we can blame other than our lack of talent. Any other thoughts from you guys on this topic? I still have more. I do have one more thought, and I think this is something that you can't deny. And I'm just going to call it Eye of the Tiger. Anybody who saw the Rocky movies knows Mr. T. Clubber Lang, Eye of the Tiger. That need to win. You want to talk about ultimate alpha males? There's not a guy in professional sports who isn't an ultimate alpha male. And this extreme need to win by any means necessary, at any cost, and the determination behind the Eye of the Tiger can really conquer most things. And if you're the type of personality that brings that to the table, then it's hard to slow you down. It's hard to prevent you from winning a fight. It's determination is such a huge part of motivation. And when I talk about being lazy with my sim racing and getting out there and not hitting my marks, being sloppy on turn-ins, being sloppy on making apexes, I think that's a deficiency in a certain amount of determination and not demanding that I do perfection, which I should be obtainable to me. I mean, that's looking very inward. Oh, Max agrees. We finally got Max to chime in on something, and he totally agrees. I lack determination. Thank you, Max. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your confidence in me, buddy. But again, there is some soul searching involved. I'm getting comments from some friends, you know, and another form of contacting me. Go back to my What Am I Doing Wrong videos, which I need to get back to. I could do a comparison of yesterday's race and Cy Yip versus me, and I think we'd see the exact same thing we've seen. And it's making mistakes, and a lot of mistakes come from just simply not hitting your marks. If I know exactly where I'm supposed to be to set up my braking zone, and I place my car there, and I know exactly my braking marker, and I have the ability to automatically ABS and not lock up the brakes and get maximum braking and keep it right on that verge, that the timing of my release should be perfect for my turn-in. I should make my apex carrying maximum amount of speed. You know, right now, funny enough, Fabio Martin, somebody mentioned his name right now, and I think some of the visualization stuff that we've done with Fabio, Fabs, and right there telling you the corner, getting the maximum speed through the. This is like what he would be saying in my ear as I'm sitting there in a meditative state, breathing, visualizing being on the track and doing these things. And you know, us common people, I think we have to look for everything we can. And when you talk about professional sports, these guys are using mental coaches to make sure that they hit their marks, that they don't make mistakes, that they see themselves doing the best that they can and emulating it over and over again with ease, repeating it with ease. It's everyday business for them. Martin Kroenke, Gregor Hutu, they don't make mistakes. You have to catch them on an off day if you're going to ever beat them. Chime in with some of your guys' alien communication. They have a inner communication with each other. And Eye of the Tiger, yeah, it's a big part of it. Yes, sure, we've seen cheating, but in the end, a lot of these competitions come down to in-person at this point. So we can't just say that either. Fabio, hey, I'm talking about Fabs right here. Yeah, that's a great point. You think about how many people, how many kids get into karting, how many people get into amateur level sports with a vision of moving up and going up into the ladder, and how few of them make it. You think of pro football and how many guys were the best on their Pop Warner team, the best on their high school, and then they got to college and found out they were only like one of the guys. Maybe they're the best on their college team, but then they didn't even go drafted into the NFL. That pyramid of the guys who get in it and the guys who get to that top level is a very steep angle and very steep curve. Subi Sam, you've experienced exactly what I experienced in the world's fastest gamer. See ya, Spatial. Thanks for being here. Pro Sim, that's a great point. So many of us sim racers, there is a category of people who are sim racers and are here for the competition, and sim drivers who are here for the experience, even if that experience takes them into racing. It's experiencing some racing. And if you go out to an SSCA amateur level racing weekend, you're going to see half the grid there just to be there experiencing the action. They have no intention of being competitive. They're not going to spend that kind of money. They know they don't have the skill set. They're there for the fun, the camaraderie, and the experience of something that they've always admired as a hobby, racing, automotive culture. What we all love, or we probably wouldn't sim race. If I wanted to be a professional gamer, I wouldn't pick sim racing. I'd pick shooter games and Street Fighter. So this is sort of picking the small scale, and I think in the professional world, other than a very, very select few, there are so few pro racers compared to, like, football, you know, European football. And Black Eye, great point, is that we don't all need to be first. That's not always our agenda. For me, I have this ego that I want to win, and it's so frustrating that I don't, but at the same time, I'm a well-grounded, realistic person, and I can't have that expectation at the level of racing that and the people that I typically race against. Ernie, that's a great point, and I don't think that is any... Ernie says, Sim Racing Alien also look for exploits in the track and the physics engine. And I completely agree, and I don't think that differs one bit from real life and what a real life team and driver do. And they are going to push the boundaries and look for every exploit on the track, whether it be cutting or just certain grip areas that might not be where you expect. And they're going to do everything they can with the car to get the most out of it. I think that is part of racing, our medium just being sim versus real world. We do the same thing and then add talent, add setup, add all that other kind of stuff. Michael, you got beaten, what, by hand controller and keyboard? I can't imagine you're getting beat by them in the high ranks of sim racing. Clarify what you meant. I missed your earlier comment. So, Pillowcun, but outside of them being able to just keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back, without talent, even rich brats don't make it to pro racing. And even the ones that even are a crossover, and I'm not going to name any names in NASCAR right now, but there are some legacies of NASCAR in the series, and they're very good racers. I'd love to say, oh, he doesn't have the talent, and maybe hundreds of other drivers were passed over for them to have a spot, but they have enough talent to be in that 102% where they're not embarrassing themselves on the circuit. They certainly belong there. And yeah, some of those rich brats have the best equipment, but you know, the Ayrton Sennas are going to beat them with lesser equipment and still qualify for that series. That's the way it works out, and that's why the cream still rises to the top no matter what in racing. I'd love to use that because I went into karting, and I know that I didn't have the bankroll of those guys. And I know that I didn't have the tuning of those guys. But I also know that if I had had the raw talent that couldn't be stopped, that I gave it a good enough go that I would have been noticed. But I wasn't that guy. Maybe not enough time in to make that impression. But if you come in as an unknown and you win races, and they find out you have no track record prior to being there, people are going to take notice. Yeah, Subi Sam, I didn't mean to take anything away from 355, because quite honestly, when I made it into the upper half in World's Fastest Gamer, I felt very accomplished. So I congratulate you, and just making a run and seeing where you stand and having the balls to see where you stand on that level, I think is a testament in its own. It takes a lot to really see where you stand on the ladder if you're willing to go look and see, where do I really stand against the best? How slow am I? Doc Darkness asked if he's a console. Yes, a console gamer. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great starting point. But the high ranks, the super competitive ranks, and the higher quality sims are on the PC. It doesn't mean that you can't win money, because all these money events are coming to the console too, because that's where the real masses are. But if you really want to know where you stand against the Gregor Hutus, the Martin Cronkies, or the guys who have been the reigning champs for 10, 20 years, you'll have to step up to the PC. Yes, Classic Z-View, that's a relevant point about sim racing and how I think sim racers are actually better drivers than real-life racers, and the amount of time we get to dedicate to it for free, essentially, or very low cost, allows us to practice our skills and our talents so much more than they do, and push things to the boundary, because we don't have to pay for the mistakes with physical injury or crash damage to our car that costs money even for rich people. But the aliens actually practice less than we do. If you really listen to most of them, interview after interview, I find out these guys are only putting in 30 minutes to 2 hours in preparation for most competitive races for them. It's them maximizing their time. It's them hitting their marks. It's them understanding the car at a different level than we can, like Michael Schumacher did in that thing, in that video, and being able to get the most out of it from lap 2 and 3 instead of lap 2 and 3 hours into it. Ross Bentley's Speed Secrets. I'll have to check it out, John. Thank you. Thank you. And I agree. Just understanding and holding yourself to a certain criteria is going to get you a long way, and that gets back to the eye of the tiger factor in this conversation. Yeah, Subi, that's irrelevant. There's a much larger crowd when you really can... maybe not in total numbers as much as how we're all international, whereas guys running the Mazda in Japan have no idea what the Mazda guys in America are doing and how they really compare. We, being international and having comparable and maybe bigger numbers, can compare ourselves on a much larger scale for sure. Relaxing is very important. If you watch me race, people occasionally say, "Breathe, Sean, breathe." I am breathing or I'd pass out, but I'm probably not breathing well enough if you think I look that tight and I'm sweating that much, and that's certainly not a relaxed state. And Fabs, being my mental coach, being in the room, will probably say something about it. I'm actually meeting with him later today. So I'm sure I'll hear about it from him, but this is our show, to be honest. This is our show where I don't have to protect myself on Saturdays. I don't have to be anything other than just one of us. And I'm just being honest with you guys, I tell you what, I haven't even talked about this, fitness. Not all these aliens are fit, but for me to have that mental edge requires a certain amount of physical confidence. And I don't know why, for my personality, they go hand in hand, but I'll admit it, I'm running like 8 pounds overweight for me right now. And that is just enough for me to not have that physical confidence, that edge in my personality that requires for me to achieve the eye of the tiger. And for me to get to that point where I demand winning, I demand the best lap time. Right now, my optimal and my best time versus my optimal best time, comparing sectors, is as much as a full second apart from each other. If I'm 3 seconds slower than an alien, a full second of that is me making those mistakes. And I can guarantee you that an alien is probably closer to 1 to 2 tenths off of their optimal. They are that consistent. They are that good at hitting the same mark every lap that there isn't this huge variation from optimal to what their best lap actually is. And that's me going by my best lap. Now let's talk about my actual fall off, or my average lap, which might end up being even as much as a half to a full second slower than that. So now you're looking at me being as close to within 1 to 1.5 seconds of the aliens. Now we're talking the difference between Johnny Herbert and Michael Schumacher. I'd feel a lot better about that. So how much of that is my own mistakes? And then that gets back to everything we've been talking about. A lot of it being mental, a lot of it being eye of the tiger, a lot of it being determination, consistency, accuracy, preparation being part of that, but maximizing it. And then on top of it, that utter knowledge of how to drive the car, the talent factor that we can't talk about, but a lot of those things are part of their talent. So, any other thoughts? I'm pretty much tapped out. Again, what I'm not going to use are excuses like that they're cheating, because on a whole, I don't think that's the difference. I'm not going to use excuses like, hardware, especially in my case, but I mean, I run a Thrustmaster wheel very commonly. I run a Fanatic wheel very commonly. I've run Logitech wheels most of my sim racing career. That is not what it's been. I've had the best of the best equipment. I'm a good racer. If you've raced me in sim racing systems, you know I can hold my own. Hold on one second. I'm getting another relevant point from somebody watching the show. Great point. This is my friend Ben, who usually chimes in on the chat as well, and he does some behind the scenes work with me as well to help out. So he's also talking about how much we drive over the limit. If you've watched my races yesterday, I a couple of times left opportunity to the guy I was fighting with because I drove over the limit of the car. I didn't stay within the boundaries. I didn't do what I know. I went beyond my braking zone, or I took it too fast into the corner and caused a slide, or I got greedy with the gas pedal and started to push before I'd even gotten to apex, knowing full well in my common sense brain that can only result in understeer and not making the corner. I know these things, but I don't always do it. Subi Sam, it doesn't matter though. Again, you can throw the most money at it in the world. That does not get you a ride in Formula One, and even if it does, for how long? And then let's face it also, if you had all the money in the world and you could buy the best seat in Formula One, when that car started finishing in 15th or 18th position, people would be laughing at you every day. You have to back it up. You can't just do it on money. I mean, I'm not going to say that money isn't a factor for why almost every pro is a pro. It is almost impossible to get to be a pro real-life racer without money, because just the amount of time to even get noticed, to start moving up the ladder on someone else's dollar, takes hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. But in sim racing, we do not have any of that. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about us sim racers versus our aliens, not necessarily us versus pro Formula One drivers. So that you know, but I mean, it's a relevant point in real life racing for sure, for sure. Now, Paul, can you clarify what you mean about the racers are there just to entertain, like it's WWF, or they're not actually there for the racing? I would have to believe that's a minority. I don't think you spend a whole career running late models and small tracks all over running the rough circuit to get yourself in a position to get a truck or a NASCAR ride, and then you're just gonna sit there and, you know, entertain the crowd. I'm not sure about that. But you know, that's exactly the kind of thing I want to talk about. You know, John Hurley, fast hands are very important. You look at that video with Michael Schumacher. He was doing traction control steering. His steering was not linear. I always imagine the perfect corner being that we turn for apex as we are slowing down, and then the perfect moment of the slowest speed would be right at apex, the furthest you're going to turn the wheel, and then you would start rolling it out and applying throttle, and then if you're really badass, you'd get to a little hint of counter steering to offset getting on the gas a little extra coming out of the corner. To me, that, in my mind, is what a perfect corner would be. But if you looked at Michael Schumacher's traces, it was the furthest thing from that. Very quick hands. Looked like he was in a rally car, not a Formula One car. And Pro Sim, I agree. For me, that is a big part of it. Building a sim. Building something that I can have fun. Emulating automotive culture. Emulating the racing career that I always wanted, even though I didn't have the talent or the money. And being able to just experience it is what it's really all about for me. And for most of us, I just wish I was a better racer. I wish I could win the world's fastest gamer. But for me, I'm quite happy where I am. Don't get me wrong on that. But I think a lot of people are in their sim racing career go through realizations of where they'd like to be versus why they're doing this. Blake, do I believe in aliens? Yes, I do, depending on what type of aliens. I mean, I don't believe in aliens in the conventional form. I do not believe we are the only life form in our universe. So, forgive me for getting religious. If some people would call that a religious statement, I don't know what I believe. I believe in a lot of stuff, but I definitely believe in the aliens we're talking about today. That's for sure. Yeah, country gal, I think that's a relevant point, and I think that comes back to just some people. There is a certain amount of just God-given talent, and some of us might not overcome that. And Fabs, yes, and that's a key point, and that gets back to that eye of the tiger, that determination, that super alpha personality, where 100%, you know, a lot of people would say 100% is not achievable, and a lot of people would say 100% is where I will achieve, and then I will push that to a new level. When Nadia Comaneci did the backflip and got a 10, it was the first time anyone had seen anything of the sort, and she got a 10, perfect score. Now that's nothing. You know, the breaking a 5-hour marathon at one point in time was a huge accomplishment, and now that's like, you know, a time that average racers achieve. That is part of the evolution, and I think the aliens are guys leading the way, because they're the ones who's saying, no, you say this is perfect, I say I can go faster, and determined to do so, to prove it to themselves, to prove it to everybody. It's in their personality. They can't help it. They can't stop it. I believe this. And if you want to be at that level, I think you have to get in that mindset. I don't think it just comes from an innocent quest to be fast. It's darker than that in a good way. And training, that gets back to what I was saying. It's a whole mentality. That's why I say when I'm not fit, I don't have that edge. I can't achieve the mental perfection without my body helping out or leading the way even. I mean, when I'm yoked, I am so much more confident in everything I do. I can't deny that. It's endorphins, too. Yeah, it changes your chemical balance. Hey, UK, thank you for joining in on today's topic. Having a lot of fun just talking about why aliens are so much different and better than sim racers. And aliens might not even be the best word, to be honest with you. In all fairness, aliens is another one of those excuse words where I'm just giving them a label that kind of makes me feel better about how much better they are than I am. What are they? They're the pros. They're the best of the best. They're the Ayrton Sennas, the Michael Schumachers, whatever your version of motorsport or sport is. These are the guys that you watch in awe and fascination. And just, it's a miracle what they do. And if this was back in biblical times, these guys would be godly. Yes, see, Quarter, I get caught up in the moment, and I get tense. That doesn't help. I stop breathing. That doesn't help. I start fighting my equipment. That doesn't help. Blown fuse, what are you saying? It's more like 20 pounds on me? I'm just kidding. I know what you're saying. But everything's relative for everybody. I'm just giving you my personal take, and fitness is something that's been so important for me throughout life. When I'm running 8 pounds over, I'm actually rather upset. So, am I really far back on the chat? I'm gonna catch up. If I've missed your guys' question, I really apologize. We started really getting in a good conversation. I couldn't keep up. So, I'm caught up to Blake Reynolds. Oh, now I'm not. Yeah, John Cheel talks about running in league races and how pumped up you get, your heart rate, you get sweaty. Fitness is the key, and fitness is part of being able to relax in those tense moments. The Colin McRae's, yes, yes. MotoGP aliens. That's like aliens with giant balls is what that is. And how they can ride bikes like that with those balls, I don't know. Consistency. That's a huge part of it. Sai, I think, are you Sai? I have talked about you several times today. Yeah, well, and I don't think like, honestly, I don't even need to lose the full 8. If I just was on the path to losing it and just living a more in tune with my body lifestyle, for me, I'm not saying this is a key, because I'm not going to name names, but there are a handful of aliens who aren't necessarily fit, and it doesn't mean that they're not conditioned mentally, but they don't need that edge. I need that edge for other factors. Not everybody does. And you could say the same thing about pro ranks. There are some guys who are more fit than others. I believe that it's going to go a long way, even if you can achieve greatness without it. So combined, these guys who are not in tune with their body, who are capable of being this, I think they could be even better. We talk about 100% and being better. I think physical changes would help those guys be even faster. Blown fuse. No, probably not. And you look at the pro ranks of ESL, and they're starting to do various drug testing now. Not the drugs you'd think of typically in sports enhancement, but in video game enhancement. So there might be a point where you couldn't compete on that level and do good or bad drugs. As far as I say, good in terms of performance enhancing and bad in terms of performance inhibiting. Yes, Blake, that's great. And that's when I looked at my what am I doing wrong piece. That was supposed to be my wake-up call. And I've done the video. It took me, consider that video probably took me 30, 40 hours to make in the end. I didn't learn my lesson after that? Come on, Cole. Michael, 10 times real life fun factor. I agree. And repetitive fun factor. Yep, Subi, I agree. Frederick, I haven't driven city car driving. I can put it on my list of things to look into. I have a few growing requests. I am all about fun driving. I'm not always about sim racing. As much as I'm a sim racer, I'm a sim driver as well. Excuse me. Drugs are bad, okay? Thank you, Paul. Well, Subi, the drugs they're talking about in the ESL are actually guys like doing Ritalin and things that if you don't have a condition actually give you more focus and concentration, and that's a relevant point about gaming. I hate to say it, but to me that is, we talk about cheating, I would certainly call that a level of cheating. Lots of guys, I think, have done drugs and racing. I don't think that's a new phenomenon. I'm not advocating it. I don't necessarily think anybody's like won a race and then thank the drug they're on for giving them the power. So I've not ever heard that once. Okay, let's get off the drug topic. I don't think that's what the aliens are doing. You guys. Oh, boy. We're going to have a whole different show. Maybe I'll do a drinking show and on Saturday one day, and we will test the benefits or how much alcohol has effect. And yeah, let's not go there today. Let's stay with aliens versus sim racers. I don't think it's drugs. Yeah, Sai, great point. The lack of mistakes when you look at the best of the best. They do not make errors. They don't get incidents. They understand the boundaries at a different level. They expect perfection from themselves. And you're on that list, bud. You try to duck in here with us normals. I don't know. Yeah, mistake after mistake, Sai. I hear ya. I'm guilty of it. I did that race last night and made a handful of mistakes, in so many different types of mistakes as well. And when you look at the race time, you know, it's not just looking one lap. You know, we break down that one lap and find, you know, as much as 8/10 on one corner, and as much as, you know, up to, shoot, 5-6 seconds on a lap time. Now multiply that out by their ability to do it lap after lap, and my level of perfection over 10 laps is even worse than on a perfect lap. Well, and look at that Michael Schumacher video. So when you talk about, that's a great point, Sebastian, and I'm glad you brought up snow racing on P cars, or dirt racing. When you change disciplines, you learn new skill sets that are all applicable to whatever form of racing you're doing. And you want to get quick hands, there's no way to get quick hands better than driving on snow, ice, in the rain, or on dirt. You drive in a much looser condition. You want to learn the real balance of throttle application through the corner. You got to do some oval racing. It's going to teach you that every corner. You just need to do it on the turning right as well. But you learn so much more about what you can do with the car as far as throttle versus gas versus steering input and weight balance in a NASCAR scenario than you do in a road course scenario. I'm not saying switch disciplines. I'm saying learn from the other disciplines. You know, I would think the best martial artist in the world is actually somebody rounded in all of the different martial arts, taking the best parts of all of them. The best sim would be something made up of all the sims, really. Blown Fuse, what makes this a sim tunnel is that we are here discussing a topic. That's it. That's it. The pit stop is purely for the news. Pit stop is Monday through Friday, and we cover sim racing news, actual topics. I don't bring in my own topics. I don't bring in anything but news from the vendors, the hardware and software companies of our sport or hobby or industry. And Monday through Friday on the pit stop, that's what we talk about. And the Sim Tunnel is here to talk about really more single topics. And we talked about VR last week, the good, the bad, and ugly of VR. And that's the whole point, and really no other point. And I don't know if you know Wind Tunnel. It was Dave Despain's show back in the day, and it was kind of a similar format. I was heavily inspired by Dave Despain in wanting to do a show like this. Alcohol does not work. I agree. High equals fly on the rocks. Not probing. No, not those kind of aliens. I would say they have more of a computer-type brain, though, that they understand timing at a level that we don't, and they process things in their brain faster than we do. Yeah, if you outrun an alien, you will get under their skin. That is for sure. I am way behind on you guys again, trying to get caught up. There we go, caught up with you guys again. So again, I am certainly tapped out on this. This does tie into the spirit of the Simpit and everything I've been saying since the beginning of the Simpit, and trying to do videos that just make you faster. And sometimes I want to show you, sometimes I just want to talk about it. And I'm not saying that we all have to be faster. Sometimes, again, we're just sim drivers. We're just trying to experience this great hobby. And for some of us, it upsets us. You know, when I'm running 5th, 6th, 7th in a race, I can be proud of that in the end, knowing who my competition is. But I'm never happy not winning. Well, that's not true. I got some smiles yesterday running in 5th, 6th, and 7th. But I'm happiest when I'm winning a race. That I can say for sure. And you want to hear me scream, you want to hear me cheer myself and just get really excited, it's when I do win a race. So it does mean something to me. And I don't need to be an alien to win races, but I do need to maintain the things we've been talking about here today to give myself a fighting chance outside of just lucking into a win. Yeah, they have a robotic approach, Sai. That's what I was saying. They don't make mistakes. And the 50-meter mark is sacred. This is where I brake. I brake to this percent. I turn in here. I carry this much speed. And if you watch their traces, they do it lap after lap after lap. And that's just on the first element, and that's something that we're all capable of. We're all capable of being perfect, even with our own skill set. Your talent isn't perfection. Your talent is your ability to drive your car. Your ability to be perfect is what you demand of yourself. It is hard, but it's not that hard at the same time. Concentration. Are you in the game? You know, are your audio settings right? Are you busy worrying about chit-chat? Is your dog bothering you? Do you have distractions? Or are you honed in and focused on the job? And that is going to be the first factor towards that. I agree, Paul. I am happy when I'm running at a competitive level, for sure. And Sebastian, you're right. You're always racing against yourself. It doesn't matter about everybody else, and the more you worry about everybody else, the chances are you're not going to be as good as you are on your own. But there's no denying once in the race, you're out there against others, and it's hard to get away from that. Subi Sam, I agree with you 100%, and I think that is exactly the level that I have been in my sim racing world. And not knocking it, and I'm talking from my perspective, not knocking it, but when I do find frustration because I'm not winning, or I do run into frustration because I'm only 400th on World's Fastest Gamer, it comes back to that acceptance, and the aliens, the best of the best, they don't accept it. They demand higher of themselves, and when I've played other sports, I've been there. And at times in my sim racing career, I've been there. I just don't know if I've ever achieved it on a soccer field, on a bicycle race, or even on the go-kart track, or even in sim racing. And I'm not saying that with shame or with pride. I'm just being kind of realistic with myself. And if I ever wanted to sit around and cry that I didn't have a dad that got me into racing, well, I got myself into soccer and I gave it a go. But you know what? I didn't have that same determination. I didn't have that same level of perfection that the guys who went on longer than I did. I was very good. I had a lot of God-given talent, so to speak. And I did do a lot of hard work. But I wasn't as focused. I wasn't as determined. I didn't have the eye of the tiger. I loved playing. I loved winning. And I loved even training. But I just didn't do it at that same level of perfection. Not knocking it. This is a topic not everybody even cares that aliens are fat. Who cares that Gregor Hutu is that good? Who cares that Martin Kroenke is that fast? But sometimes I wonder, why are they that much faster? You know, but I narrowed it down. Maybe I could be within 1 to 1.5 seconds of them if I brought everything we've talked about together. And then I might even be long on the same grid, and might just be one of those scenarios where, yes, I'm at that tier, yes, I'm at that level, but there's still guys who are the best of the best. I watch Ronaldo play soccer, and I just think, how can nobody defend him? They know what he's going to do, and he cherry picks even to a point, sits there waiting for the perfect opportunity, and that's part of his skill set as well. And no matter how much they throw at him, and no matter how much they do, you can't stop the guy from scoring a goal. It's amazing. And there's so many great soccer football players in the world, but how many of them look at Ronaldo and just think, what the hell? How does he always open? How does he always get the foot on the ball? How does he always get the right angle and the right trajectory every time? It's amazing. And you look at Martin Kroenke, you look at Gregor Hutu, and it's the same exact thing. So even if you're just a sim driver, every once in a while you got to be a little curious. Why? How? Anyway, we're actually over an hour on this topic, which is great. I've had a great time on this one. I think you guys get where I'm going with this, and I think a lot of you guys have chimed in with some really good points on how in some ways it doesn't matter for some of us. and on how it is. Just, it's right there. It's just right there. I don't think it's miracle work. I just look at them all the things, and just one by one, make sure you don't miss that braking zone. Make sure you do the same thing every lap. Forget about your setup. Forget about your equipment. Start focusing on you and your skill set. And I think that's going to take you a lot further than worrying about a Leo Bodnar wheel, or that this guy has that setup. And then when you get that skill set, you get a good setup. But when you get that skill set, I think it'll be easier to start making a setup for yourself. So, anyway, I hope this struck a chord with you guys. I hope it was a worthy topic for the Sim Tunnel. I'm always looking for new topics, so if you have one now, you can chime in. Or if you come up with an idea, you're in the middle of the week and you're thinking, man, I'd love to just talk about this in sim racing for an hour. Please email me, Sean, S-H-A-U-N, Sean, at thesimpit.com, and I will be sure to answer your question. And if I'll give you my thoughts on the question, and more importantly, if it's a good one, I'm going to put it on the list and bring it to the Sim Tunnel, because I have a lot of fun breaking down certain things that aren't review worthy, or what am I doing wrong worthy, but just things that we wonder about, like VR and the future of sim racing, esports, and the future of our hobby as a profession. The topic today, and what makes us different. What made Ayrton Senna so great is what we just talked about today. I could have made that the topic of the show, but it wouldn't be sim racing. What made Ayrton Senna so great is exactly what we just discussed. Because I'll tell you what, the rest of the guys on the Formula 1 grid, it's what they are all thinking. Or at least 90% of them. There might have been 3 or 4 guys who were out there like so alpha, or like, I will beat him. I don't know. I will beat him. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for some great thoughts, some great input on today's show. And I think as this show develops more in the future, that we'll all get even better at talking with you guys and incorporating you into the discussion. You'll get better at getting involved in the discussion, and we can turn these into some really good topics when we get some meat and potatoes of sim racing. Maybe when we start slicing and dicing some of the things that some of our vendors, some of those hardware and software companies miss the mark. And I'm not trying to single out, and I'll never single out a particular company on this show, but as a whole, where are they missing the mark? And I think as this show goes on, we'll start diving deeper and deeper into sim racing, and being able to really take the gloves off and talk openly with our feelings about certain things in sim racing. Anyway, I enjoyed today's show. We went over an hour, so you know I was having fun. If you're still here watching, I'm assuming you had some fun as well. Thank you so much for being here. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.